Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton show. Today, once again, is an exciting episode. Let me tell you why. I was listening to a lot of the social media the last couple of days, mainly TikTok, like everybody else does. And it's funny, I understand that AI, whatever you look for, it has a tendency to like filter the things that you're searching. But something popped up to me about who really discovered America. And it made, which I already knew, you can't discover something when it's people already here. But more importantly, with the awakening that we're dealing with right now in 2024, people are now sharing their stories, and not just so much their stories, but their ancestry, recognizing that there's nothing wrong with where they come from. Things might have happened to shape us in this world and shape our ancestors, but we do ourselves a disservice if we don't share that, or we don't educate the good, the bad, and the ugly. And more importantly, not take time to really sit back and lend an ear to that individual and what struggles that they went through, their ancestors, whether you're Black, white, German, Russian, whatever. We all have some type of story that hurts us in a way. And a lot of times when you release that hurt, it feels a lot better. Today on the show, I'm pleased because I've always been fascinated by the Native American culture. I remember getting put out of school in elementary school in Terre Haute, Indiana, to be precise, because my answer to my teacher was, my question to the teacher was, I know that Native Americans have done a lot for this country, but our history books wasn't really telling the whole story. We saw Native Americans just really fighting each other, savages. They was portrayed in such a, let me put it like it is, a bullshit way. A new podcast show is out. Okay, and I'm gonna make sure I pronounce it right. Native Chalk Talk.
You nailed it.
Native Chalk Talk. Native Chalk Talk.
You got it.
And
I give you an A.
I think this is probably the first of its kind. I want you guys to listen to it, support it, subscribe to it. Today on the show is the creator behind this extraordinary podcast. I'd like to welcome to the show, Rachael Youngman. Welcome to the show, Rachael.
Thank you so much, Andre. It is truly a pleasure to be here. And again, I've known of you for years. To be on this show is truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Your bio is sick. And what I mean by sick is there's a lot more to you than meets the eye. Before we get deep into the creation of this podcast, let's take the viewers down the road on a little bit about you.
Well, I think when you said more than meets the eye, I think sometimes people look at me and go, hey, you're someone who spends time on your hair and makeup and probably loves glam. I do. But I grew up literally out in the middle of nowhere in Anadarko, Oklahoma. Little town that's named itself the Indian capital of the nation because it has more Native Americans there than anywhere in the world. And when I go out to eat, obviously I'm mixed, so I'm very light skin. I sometimes in a restaurant might be the only white looking person there.
Mm-hmm.
That's how many Native Americans are in that area. And it's kind of a little secret. I think people don't realize that some people don't think there are Native Americans left on the earth, much less so many in one place. And I truly love my hometown. It's kind of a rough town. It always has been, but it is home to me for sure. So Grew up out in the country, 5 miles west of Anadarko on Highway 9, and, we grew our own vegetables, we homeschooled, we were very self-sufficient out there. We had a well. And I really think that if I need to survive, say the zombie apocalypse happens, y'all, I think that I might be able to survive.
Right.
Don't quote me on that. But I love the way I grew up. My sisters and I, the three of us were what I called feral children because we ran around without shoes on, riding our horses bareback, shooting things. We just had a blast growing up. And nevertheless, though, I still was the princess of the family. I hold that title because my two older sisters were such tomboys, and I would get on my
Okay.
horse with a fluffy dress on. So, grew up out there. My dad taught Native American art at Riverside Indian School, which is the only remaining, or sorry, the oldest remaining boarding school that's off reservation left in the United States. So I believe they're over 100 years old and lots of history there. But of course, it's owned by the BIA now. So the history that was back in the day for Riverside was much more horrid than it is today, where there are native teachers, they are teaching culture, drumming, beadwork, all of that, in addition to just getting your education there. I am a very proud supporter of Riverside Indian School today.
Rachel,
Yeah,
let me
grew
ask
up
you a
there.
question real quick. Two questions. What was you said your mix. Who is
Mhm.
Native American? What's the other nationality? And then was this a reservation that you grew up on?
All good questions. So first off, I am part Choctaw, and I am federally registered because my lineage goes up through my great grandmother and beyond on the Dawes rolls, which was how Native Americans were forced to register in order to receive their land allotment someday. That land is still in my family today. So I do have what's called a CDIB card, Certificate Degree of Indian Blood, certifying that I am of that lineage, and it goes through my dad's side. So my dad, and then his dad, and then his mother or his grandmother, which is my great grandmother, she was full blood, and I grew up with her. In fact, she held my daughter when she was a baby, which I love to say because I'm like, that was my daughter's great great grandmother. Not
Right.
many people have a great great grandmother that was alive when they were alive. So grew up around her, and she was the sweetest woman. You would never know what her life story was. It was not a good story. But thankfully she had a happy ending once she got married and had a better life. The other question that you asked was, oh, what was that other question, Andre?
Like who was who? You said your dad was full blooded. What was your mom?
Oh, no, my dad was quarter. So my mom on the other side, she's English. We also have German, a lot of German in our blood. And so that's definitely a mix. I am definitely American mix.
You lived on a reservation, and that's
Oh, that was your other question.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, interestingly enough, when you look back at the history of what is now Oklahoma, when there were Native Americans of all these different tribes removed from their homelands in the early 1800s and moved into what was then called Indian Territory, it wasn't a state, and they had just said, here's a place that we're going to put you guys. And they removed them on what is now called the Trail of Tears. Of course, it wasn't called that
I know
then.
about that. Yeah,
Okay, good. Then somewhere the history books were
yeah,
teaching something.
yeah.
But so when they came over, what Oklahoma now was originally called was trust land, which is a little bit different than reservation land. And it had to do with the fact that we're giving every person that enrolled on the Dawes rolls about 160 acres per person. And so in that way, it's kind of confusing, but in a nutshell, when you're driving around Oklahoma, you'll see entering Potawatomi Nation, entering Cherokee country, things like that. Even though those were set aside sections for different tribes, they were actually land allotments, so they were called trust land. However, there was a recent very big change in Oklahoma, which has shaken things up. There's a lot of high emotion in Oklahoma, as you and I were talking earlier,
Right.
because there was this recent court case called McGirt versus Oklahoma. And there was one other before that, I think, that actually really got the ball rolling. I can't remember the name of it. But with McGirt versus Oklahoma, it basically, because of a case that was going on with someone claiming, hey, this crime happened on native land. I can't remember what tribe it was, but it should be tried in the federal court, not in the state court. And the reason is that was the law that was set up years and years ago, and no one was following it. So it
Right.
went all the way to the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court, all of them agreed, at least almost all of them. Either way, it got turned into, yeah, we're going to uphold the law that was already there. And in that case, when you are in Oklahoma, when you are tried now as a Native American on Native American land under the federal courts. There are a lot of reasons why that's a good thing. And I have spoken to our chief multiple times about this. I've interviewed him about it. Um, a lot of people have misunderstandings. I could go on for an hour and I won't, on why people are really upset about this, but it also turned our lands back into reservations, which is wonderful because it's finally we're recognized as what it is. There's a group of land that is truly Choctaw land, that is truly Chickasaw land, etc. And we're being recognized as that, which is a huge change in Indian country. We are winning right now. And
But is this land? I mean, it's great to have land. Don't get me wrong.
sure,
But is it economical land? Meaning, is it suitable for farming? Is it suitable for cattle? You know, is it a product? Is the land productive that they're giving you? Because you could just give somebody some land and you can't do nothing with it. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Yeah.
It's interesting you ask that, because when the land allotments first started coming out, in fact, my family had some down in the Arbuckle Mountains and then some in McLean County, Oklahoma, which is so far away from each other. It's like you own land that's in two places that's hard to get to one over the other. One was in
Right.
the mountains that you can't farm it, you can't do, so they ended up selling it,
Right.
which thankfully they made money from it. But in general, there are parts of Oklahoma that are not farmable, not, you can't get much out of that. It's desert.
Right. Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then there are some parts that are super lush, very good farmable land. Your cattle can graze nicely on it. And so it really depended on where the government initially put those tribal areas. And so it's still the same as it always has been. So let's say I'm saying Acme tribe, just making that up, is out to in the panhandle. Poor Acme tribe, it doesn't do them much good, probably. Hopefully
Right.
they can figure out something to do with it. But yeah,
You you
you're the first person that's ever asked me that.
you you mentioned different Indians, and I know a lot of Native Americans, um, tribes, but
Yes.
you brought up something that was kind of curious. We've
Mhm.
always, America, let me rephrase this because I don't want somebody getting pissed off at me.
Oh, I hear you. I have to watch myself too. I get it.
We live in a world, because it's not just here. We live in a world where such divide and conquer amongst ourselves for resources. Let's call it what it is. It's really resources and putting your boot on somebody's throat, a culture,
Mhm.
a group of people. You grew up in this environment. You see the different tribes. These tribes have fought against the U.S. for many years, from the the Trail of Tears to other Indian Native American wars against Reconstruction of America. Let's call it what it is. Because when the Iron Horse came through, it changed the whole landscape for everybody. Now, all
Right?
of a sudden, you guys have been allotted all of this different land. How are the different tribes communicating to make what they have better, and more importantly, to not allow the same boot to come back in there with the new development to put them
Mhm.
back in the Civil War Reconstruction era.
Whoa, very good point. And we are literally seeing that today. Okay, so the tribes, first off, when the McGirt versus Oklahoma thing happened, it really there okay, first off, there are the five civilized tribes, what they call civilized, because they were more willing to work with the government
Right.
when they said, hey, we want to move you. And so they worked more from a business perspective and negotiated. And I think that's part of the reason. Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, Creek, and Cherokee, those five have always worked well together in a way. There's some rivalries, but in general, they've always been like, we need to come to the government to ask for XYZ. Now with the McGirt versus Oklahoma thing, they totally came together and said, here's we're going to come in as one voice and fight this in the Supreme Court, and they won. And it's made them more bonded than ever. It woke our people up. It woke everybody to go up, say to go up to the government and say, you made these treaties with us, even if we're not even talking from an emotional standpoint, we are talking from a legal standpoint. You need to uphold the law. It's already law. You need to uphold it. Well, the fight has come against our tribes today. And I usually don't get very political on my podcast, but now I have an opportunity to. So here I go.
Yeah.
Um, Governor Stitt in Oklahoma, he claims to be Cherokee, and he kind of ran on that a little bit when he ran for governor the first term. He's in his second term now. And when he ran on that, a lot of historians got together and that do native history work. And they realized from his ancestral records that there are stories that his family, which was very common at the time, were actually white. And they petitioned internally, gave a little money here and there to get on the Dawes rolls so that they could get land allotments, again 160 acres each usually. And so they claimed Cherokee blood. That happened a lot. There are still people today that are descendants of Dawes rolls that were actually not native. It happened a lot. Okay, so he ran on being Cherokee, and he has done nothing but put down the tribes and fight everything single thing. Last I heard, and I think that number has gone up since then, he had been fighting the Supreme Court decision about the McGirt versus Oklahoma thing 47 times. He is wasting our taxpayer money going against the court. He also is trying to, and I need an update on this, but trying to get our fishing and hunting licenses taken away. He came up with this loophole that had been missed by our tribes when it comes to our tribal tags. So when you're in Oklahoma, you're driving around, you'll see a Caddo tag on a car, you'll see a Choctaw tag. And you can know what people's tribes are just by looking at their car sometimes. So it's kind of cool. We're very proud of those, and we get them at a discount from our tribes. Well, there was a loophole in there where some of the tribes had not signed some legal document many, many years ago when
Mhm.
those tags came out. He has gone full force on those and is also trying to take the legal ability away from the other tribes who are operating in a legal sense. He's trying to get that right taken away from them as well. That recently he just lost that, and I believe it went to the Supreme Court. Don't quote me on that, but it went high enough to where they're like, Stitt, you got to stop. He's going after literally everything he possibly can. He doesn't like this. He doesn't like the tribes having any kind of
That
power.
that story sounds a little bit like Yellowstone.
Right? I love that
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit like Yellowstone. And I think people need to understand Hollywood has a way of telling you what's really going on in the world. And
Yeah.
you would have individuals like that during the time of Reconstruction in America, that if I'm of a white descent or any type of descent, and I know that there's federal papers that will allow me to get some land, that would explain why there was a lot of interbreeding with the Native
Oh,
Americans to get that.
yes. Yes. They at Killers of the Flower Moon, that movie, that's basically what that's about too. They were
Yeah.
marrying the white people were marrying the Osage people so they could get their land. And some of it was true love in certain very rare cases, but most of it was about the land.
When you let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the lady that really made a difference in your life outside of your mom. And I like how you said your grandmother had a hard life, but
Yeah.
luckily it changed. Did she ever share with you some of those stories that she saw her people go through?
Yes, sir, she did. So when she was 3 years old, she was literally sold. So she was born in 1903. So you and I talked before we got on the show about how it wasn't that long ago that things were happening that are just horrid in your community with your people and my community with my
I
people.
wish people would understand it really wasn't that long ago. You had Reconstruction in the 18s, no 17s, 18s. Now you got 19. It wasn't that long ago, and you saw her.
Was
That's even more strange. She
Yeah,
lived in your time, so it wasn't that long ago.
she was that bridge between the early 1900s and today. I sometimes baffled by that. Sometimes people will tell me their grandmother is 100 years old or something. I'm like, "Oh my God, put me in front of that woman because I need to hear what life was like
Yeah.
back then." Um, but yeah, so in 1903 she's born. In 1906 she is sent to live with a white guardian named J.D. Anderson. So if anyone's watched the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, there were guardianships. And basically, it was a white person who was put in control of a native person because the government said the native people can't possibly know how to run their money and their land. So the Osage, for instance, had struck oil on their land that was allotted to them by the government and just struck it rich. They were millionaires back in a time when there weren't many millionaires. And of course, people wanted a piece of that pie.
Mhm.
Same with my family. The only thing I know is there was no murdering going on, but there was still a lot of that stealing land from our families going on. So her mom, her own mother, sells her for $3,000 to a man named J.D. Anderson, who became her guardian. He was listed as the wealthiest landowner in Sulphur, Oklahoma. And the reason he was wealthy was because we found out later, it wasn't until after my great grandmother had died, that several of her aunts and uncles were also under his guardianship. So if you think about 160 acres per each of these children, he had a lot of freaking land and he
Yeah.
had cattle on it. So at an early age, she is sent to live with her aunts and uncles and her half sister Mary Bell to live with this JD Anderson. Now she told us stories like, and they were truly, I don't like to whitewash the word slavery. I like to say a slave was a slave because that is how awful slavery was. I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that, but she was a slave to that family. They did all their cooking and cleaning, their tending to the horses, tending to the cattle from a very early age. So at yes, at 3 years old, she becomes a slave, and she and her sister, Mary Bell, they were early teenagers, and they had been given bonnets to wear to a picnic. They were super excited about it. They were getting out of the house. They were gonna be around young people. They got to wear bonnets, and her cheeks were red because in Oklahoma, it gets freaking hot. So she was really hot. Her cheeks were red. And the mom, the wife of JD Anderson, came over to her. Maybe there was a jealousy factor there. But she said, you put rouge on your cheeks, you're a whore. And she slaps her on the face and told her she couldn't go to the picnic. So there were little things like that. She didn't go into a lot of detail, but Mary Bell was sexually assaulted. I don't know if my great grandmother was because she would never say, but Mary Bell could never have children. And I've always wondered, was that probably a relation to what she had gone through? But so my great grandmother, again, her name was Ella, and she never had a middle name and didn't know her birthday. So we always celebrated two birthdays for her because she was like, I think it was this date or this date. So we would always celebrate two. And I love this story. Okay, this is going to be inspiration for anyone who's going through a hard time, I hope. So she had a white horse. I've always wondered if it was a Choctaw pony because Choctaw ponies were a thing back then. They came from Mississippi and were transferred on the Trail of Tears. So those horses were survivors too, that were descendants of the original Choctaw ponies. Okay, so she would get on her white horse and go running through the fields, and her guardian would always yell at her, "Get off that horse, you're gonna hurt yourself or you're gonna hurt the horse." And she was always like, "Nope." And she would just keep on running. And it was her defiance. It was the only time she would ever be defiant, even in her adult life. She would look back and say, I would never talk back to anybody anytime until I was riding my horse. It gave her strength, it gave her power. She felt empowered. And sometimes I know it sounds cheesy, but it truly is true. When I have a hard time and when my daughter has a hard time, I'm always trying to relay to us, remember the white horse, because that will give you strength. If Ella could get on her horse and get away from it mentally for a little bit, we can too. Let's go there in our minds.
Mm.
So I encourage anybody having a hard day, you're welcome to steal that story in your mind anytime.
It is funny, the connection that Native Americans have with the African ancestors when it comes to human trafficking, when it comes to enslavement, when it comes to rape, pillaging. Um,
Yeah.
we see such movies, like I said, as the Yellowstone, where um, the Indians, the unsavage, the savage, are
Yes.
forced into Christianity and turned away from their spiritual beliefs, which is you can correct me, which is really probably more nature than anything. How does
Yeah.
that? How does is that? How do you guys deal with that now? As how Hollywood has portrayed the different uh, groups of the Native Americans in Hollywood? And the second part of that question is, um, how do you guys how do you guys keep the your spirituality like you had like you was taught
Mm.
back in those days?
Whoa, that's a big one because even my own viewpoints have changed a little bit over the years. So, on one hand, I grew up okay, so obviously Native Americans were very spiritual people and very, very earth-minded. They
Right.
would kill their food to eat it and then thank their food. It wasn't a barbaric thing that they were doing. They weren't torturing animals like you might see today in with some bad people. They were really trying to do what was good for the earth, good for people. Were there warring tribes? Yes, and there were some very brutal battles that would happen. That's true. That comes straight from people. Ancestral stories will tell you, yes, we did these things to other tribes. However, it was a kill or be killed situation. It was the strongest survive. And I mean, about how wild the world was back then, or this world. Back in Europe, big things were happening in innovation. And here, they were still living off the land and enjoying that. But it was wild and it was harsh. Okay, so they knew how to survive. Their spirituality is what kept them going oftentimes. And they used medicines, medicinal herbs, and they would find out that some of those herbs, of course, would cause hallucinations. They would say that and I believe it, that they would see God or whatever God was to them. Jehovah is what it is in Choctaw, and they would basically get out of themselves for a minute to plan the battle or to become one with the earth or one with what they saw as a kind of a mother nature factor. And today there is peyote. So peyote is the plant that you can grow only in certain areas. Like you have to go down to New Mexico to grab some peyote to use to get to that place in your mind, that secondary place in your mind to be able to have peyote meetings, peyote church. They call it Indian church, that kind of thing. And I remember growing up, we lived on a hill and
Right.
below us, you okay on time?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. And below us in the valley was all native land and it a lot of in native housing and that kind of thing. And they had teepees down there and they would do a lot of peyote meetings. And at nighttime, so I grew up Christian, and my family, even my great-grandmother, we were all Christian, and so we were told, "Don't participate in that. It's evil, it's bad, there's demonic spirits," and all of that. And again, all of that's open to interpretation. I don't judge anyone who has any feelings one way or the other about it, because we all have our feelings, right? But, understanding it, though, is the key. Learning about it and understanding where they're coming from, where we're coming from, I think is important. So
Yeah.
I would hear the drumming at night. It would be 1 o'clock in the morning, and my sisters and I would be scared. And it's funny that we were scared because they weren't doing anything to us. They weren't hurting us, and we knew that that was part of the culture that we grew up around, but for some reason we didn't participate in it. Um, and part of the reason that my family was Christian and is Christian is because the and this is controversial as well. When the when a lot was going on with the natives back even in the 1700s, there were a lot of
Right.
missionaries that were sent in from Europe. And I have such a mixed conflicting feeling in my head about it. I will admit I conflict about it because on one hand, um, there are many Choctaws today. I even just went to record a sermon and a Choctaw singing down in this remote place in Oklahoma recently. It was beautiful because they only sing in Choctaw, and they drew on that faith when they walked the Trail of Tears. They even sang Choctaw hymns. I sing some of them as well, where they drew on that faith in their God, in Jehovah, to be able to walk the Trail of Tears and to survive. And the mission that came from the missionaries teaching them that stuff. Now, some missionaries were not not the best people in the world, and some were good. A lot of them also walked the Trail of Tears with the Native Americans because they believed they were part of their people now. And it's like, if you suffer, we suffer. The thing I don't like about all of that is clearly the native boarding schools run by Christians who were beating the children, beating, as you know, I mean, everybody seems to know this now, thankfully, but they were beating the culture, traditions, and language out of them. They weren't allowed to ever talk about their language
They
or
almost did the
their
same
lives
thing as
again,
they did when they bought the blacks on the slave ships, and basically they beat you into submission
right?
of a faith. So with now that you know that you mentioned something, you said you have struggles with that. Like, is there a
Yeah.
divide between the people that are still on these reservations, or should we say homes, versus is let me rephrase it. How does the people, when you go back home, do they
Mhm.
look at you different because you're more what they might call the new civilization, you adapted to
Right.
AI? What how what's the feed between you two now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, um, because I was taught that, Indian church was bad. I hate even saying that with my mouth now.
What is Indian
Um,
church? Is that the TP that you sweat, the sweat lodge where you go in there and you know
it actually well, those are usually called sweats, but,
what?
usually some kind of substance is involved. You
Okay,
can partake or not partake, it's totally up to you,
okay,
but it can be in an actual church building, or it
okay.
can be in a teepee, it just depends. But I grew up around more of the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache than I did the Choctaw, so I saw all that stuff growing up, and they were much more into that, where the Choctaws had kinda gotten away from a lot of it by my age and had gone more Christian. And so, even though I saw all of the Native American church and all of that, I didn't participate, but I also was judgy at a time because I was told to be judgy. It's like, don't participate in that. It's bad, it's evil. I have a totally different new respect now that I understand it better and I'm grown up, and I don't judge it because I think they're doing a a beautiful thing. What they do though is they hide it more than, say, it's more popular to be Native and Christian than it is to be Native American and be practicing Native American church. So isn't that interesting? Like they feel like they have to hide it because Christians have judged them for so long. Even
Do you feel that and I know I'm gonna get some backlash about it, but this show's about education and understanding.
Oh, sure. Safe space.
Yeah. So my question is, do you feel that the church, Christianity, church, or whatever, has wiped away or is slowly diminishing your culture
Mm.
belief back to nature, their spirituality? Is because if you lose that, don't you eventually wipe out the civilization of your people in general?
Oh,
Almost a almost a
yeah.
religious genocide.
Yes, I can totally see that. Although, even though I say that many tribes are hiding the fact that they still use the substances and practice, there's a kind of a comeback coming to it now. The interesting thing is there's Christians who don't believe in it, won't touch it. There's Native Americans who are all in to their religious culture, which is I love both. And then there's the bridge gappers ones. There are those who do both. They go to Christian church on Sunday and they might do Native church that night. And I think that that's okay. I mean, it's not my place to say whether it's okay or not, but I love that that's happening. I love that it's staying alive because we don't want that to go away. And again, it at one point was a genocide. It was, hey, what you're doing is calling up evil spirits, and you are not allowed to do that anymore. Maybe it was calling up evil spirits. So no, I'm not the one to judge that, but I want it to stay around. I
What
want them to keep doing it.
what do you think your grandmother she died, God rest her soul.
Mhm.
Um, looking at all that she went through now, what do you think she wants from you? What is your mission here?
Mm,
Because let me
yeah.
put it the way it is. Your grandmother went through her mother went through the Reconstruction of America. She saw her parents saw
Right?
the Iron Horse come through the land. She
Mhm.
saw the Trail of Tears. She heard the stories. She saw when all the nations had to come together to fight for their land, to get the boot off of their necks, to settle years later, to be uh castrated from their beliefs and to believe in a whole new religious system, a whole new way of life. But then in the same process, be victim of human trafficking, being a victim of
Mhm.
rape, pillaging. Now that she's gone, and you said she died peacefully, looking at all that, looking at your people, the five tribes, what do you think she wants you to do now? What do your people want you to do?
That I I'm almost dumbfounded and a little bit teary because she is my driving force for what I do now. I do have a full-time job. I'm in software sales, but I I do this podcast for her to unsilence her and unsilence the other people who were told for so many years, don't speak your language, don't talk about your culture. Those a lot of those people are gone now and their stories are in the wind. But thankfully, with Native Americans, there is a lot of oral culture that has passed down. And I'm so grateful for my guests who come on. There is a certain age group that is still very um, nervous to speak. There are elders that when I have them on the show, they hold back or they'll start to say a story and they'll be like, I'm not going to tell that one. And I'm like, you're in a safe place now. You can stick it to the man now by telling your story. And so what I want them to do on the podcast is about excuse me, sharing and preserving our ancestral stories as well as our tribal history, culture, and traditions. Let's keep it alive, but let's also educate everybody else that wants to learn about it. I think people are afraid to ask questions. They don't want to say the wrong terminology or say you know, offend somebody. And I get that. And I appreciate that they're being so respectful. But now's the time for Native Americans to speak. And that's what this podcast is about. You talk as much as you want, and we will listen.
What are three before we wrap up? And what are three of the most silenced topics that they are afraid to talk about. Because as a
Mm,
doing a podcast, we have to do our background to some degree. We have to do a
true.
research and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you're researching these people, but then, like you said, there are certain things that really scare them. What are three things that really scare them that they don't want to talk about?
So first off, I would say the bad things that happened. For instance, I was interviewing a Pawnee man and not an elder, but he's a leader. And I was interviewing him and I told this story about the Pawnee and how they had been a bunch of children had been taken from their homes and taken to, I can't remember what state it was, maybe Arizona, and they were being auctioned off as slaves. And they didn't, the people that had stolen them didn't get the money that they wanted for, they didn't get the high price that they were expecting per head. Hate to say it that way, but because they failed at that auction, they slaughtered all the children that they had taken over there. And I told about that story. I'd done a ton of research on it. I told about that story in front of him on the podcast, not realizing it was a huge trigger for him. And so I have to be careful sometimes what I share too, because I don't want to offend my guest or bring up a hurtful time too much, although there's a balance there. And he said, I have to stop you right there. We cannot talk about that. You cannot, will you please erase that? And I was like, I will absolutely erase it. And I still, until today, is the first time I've ever told that
You
story
know what?
again.
I'm glad you told
But
that story because I never knew that. And this is the problem with history. And I used to be a history teacher. If
oh,
we
I
don't
didn't know
tell our stories to people,
that.
no
Right.
matter how painful they are, they become dust in the wind. I never,
Yes.
I never
Yes.
knew that that happened. I'm almost in tears because I can see the visualization of kids, just like slaves, being taken to the auction block. And then because I
Right.
don't want to feed these kids on the journey back, it's a lot easier just to fucking slaughter them.
Right. Ouch, man. It's so bad. It's so bad. And so there's, I mean, I don't know what you would do on your show too about a story like that. Like on one hand, we need to tell about that. And see, you're saying that was eye-opening. I needed to know, where the person that's from that tribe is like, oh, it's too painful. A younger person than him, he wasn't an elder, but he still wasn't in his 20s. Person in their 20s may be more willing to talk about that because they're farther removed from their grandparents who were saying don't talk about things or whatever. um
I
yeah,
had
so
no
very sensitive.
idea, seriously. And I think as a um, podcaster and creator as yourself, it's it's our job to
Yeah,
create a comfortable space, but to also educate and empower individuals. This
true.
is a story I've never heard of. For years, we've allowed a system of government education to
Mhm.
dictate the stories.
Yep.
They put in what they feel can keep the foot on your neck.
Yes.
Um, Give me another educational thing that people are afraid to tell about your people.
Sure. Sure. And I believe both of these have to do, well, one of them has to do with some whitewashing, I believe. The boarding schools. There are some people today who grew up in a boarding school, and especially the elders were on the cusp of when the boarding schools started to change a little bit once the BIA started taking over.
It's the
But
boarding schools, the one that we see on Yellowstone, where they take the native kids
yes,
and they beat them. The nuns beat them, and the priest was also doing the same thing. The part that really choked me up is when the one girl got tired and she ran away, and
yes,
the her friend didn't want to tell, and the preacher or whatever, the father took his boot and stomped and killed her.
yep.
And I'm
Oh,
thinking,
right.
how
It's just
crazy. But people fail to realize that shit took place.
it took place, and like you said, it wasn't that long
It wasn't that
ago.
long ago.
Right. And they were, nobody cared about them. There was no one to run to go save me. There was no savior in all of this.
You seem to be, before we wrap up, you seem to be caught in the crossfire. Let me tell you where this makes sense.
Okay.
I'm gonna use a narrative. My father worked for the city for many years. He retired, but he wanted to still work.
Mhm.
But my father didn't have the resources. Well, let me take it back. There were resources available for him to change with the time. You get where I'm
Okay.
going?
Right,
He
right.
didn't change with the time. He didn't evolve with the time. So he slowly wilted. Wilted meaning not died, but he died internally because he wasn't able to keep up with what was going down. Here it
Oh,
is. You've been given so much information from a child, from your grandmother to your father to your mother, your sisters, and you've evolved from Oklahoma. You was recently in Carmel, Indiana, but you still are caught between the crossfires because you've evolved,
right,
but you
right.
still have those ancestry traits. How difficult is it for you to balance the two?
It is the funny thing is I almost didn't start the podcast because I'm like, I'm so light-skinned, I don't want anyone to go, "Hey, you don't have a right to tell our stories." And I'm not telling their stories, they're telling their stories. I'm just the outlet. The podcast is the outlet. But yeah, sometimes I do fight with that because I growing up in Anadarko, I was a totally different person than I am today as far as getting to see the world, getting to see more and learning from people like yourself. Back then I was kind of in this bubble and I loved that bubble. I still do to this day, but I didn't know much about the outside world, especially being homeschooled, right? But yeah, I mean, sometimes I think I I don't maybe I don't have the right to be so passionate about Native causes or to speak for Native people. And over time, I have let that go. If people don't like me, they don't like me, and I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna make them change their minds, right? And I've also learned to just be so proud of my great-grandmother that I hope she's speaking through me, and I feel like I can't go wrong if I do that. If I have a really I'll try to make it short. I was doing a lot of ancestry research on certain pieces of my family members because they all seem to have tragic stories. And I felt like I need to put this on paper for my descendants because they need to know their stories as well. And I had hit a brick wall. I wasn't able to find anything. And so that night I was like, I'm done. I put so many hours into this. I'm just done. And and then I closed my eyes and I was like, "I can't be done." And I started praying or maybe speaking to, maybe praying's not the right word, but I was speaking to my Coley ancestors, Coley, and I was like, "Coley ancestors, please help me. If you want me to tell your stories, I can't do it on my own anymore. I've hit a brick wall." At 3 a.m. in the morning, I wake up and I'm just scrolling through Facebook because I couldn't sleep because I was upset. And I found this group called Early Oklahoma and Indian Territory. And I posted in there the story of my uncle Cicero, who had shot at JD Anderson. He was one of the people that was under his guardianship, and how he hadn't killed JD Anderson, but he was put into jail. And the newspaper says Indian makes attempt to kill. He was shooting him because of a land dispute because he couldn't get his land allotments back. And of course, he's the bad guy. My JD Anderson's not the bad guy, but Cicero's the bad guy, of
Mhm.
course, because he shot at him. So anyway, I put that story on there and said, if anyone knows any Coley people, please let me know. I wake up the next morning to get ready to go. I was living in Texas at the time. I was going to go downtown Houston for work. I was getting ready, and I just happened to look at my Facebook, and there's this message, and it's from this girl named Carrie, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, we're related. We're distant cousins, but I've been doing like 30 years of research on the Coley family because," and she's like, "I noticed that you have information on another part of the family that I didn't know anything about. Let's get together." I mean, how crazy is it
Yeah.
that for the first time ever, I spoke to my ancestors and they spoke back? I just get
Maybe
goosebumps
they
every
was
time.
telling you, maybe they was telling you you better go back and do a reevaluation
That's right. Get
of
back in that girl.
your spiritual connection. You definitely got that beast mindset. I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. How can the viewers support you, listen to your podcast? Give us some information on that.
Yeah, great. So my website is nativechalktalk.com. So it's Native, and then Chalk Talk is spelled Choctalk. It's basically native Choctaw talking. And then also you can find me anywhere on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, even. And feel free to please go on there. Please like, subscribe, listen, give me feedback. I'm wide open. Or if you want to hear about a topic that you'd like for me to cover, I'm happy to do that as well. In addition, I have a shameless plug here. I have funded my podcast from day one, on my own. I'm my only person. I do all my editing, recording, interviewing, research. I don't have any support. And so I would love to do more and do better research. I'm looking for someone who can either help volunteer here and there, just whenever you can, or sponsor me. I will make a commercial for you if you'd like, or provide a commercial to me. I'll put it on the show. I need funds and I need hands. So if anyone out there would like to, I will not argue with you. I will gladly accept any help.
And a lot of people don't realize producing and doing a successful podcast takes money. And my hats off to
Does.
you for believing in yourself and using your own money to invest in yourself to live your grandmother's, to be her voice why in a situation where she can't. Leave the viewers with something that only you can leave the viewers with. You've been through so much. You're definitely a warrior in my book. Leave the viewers with something.
Awesome. I would say, preservation and knowledge are both such important things. If you can get out there and learn as much as you can, whether it's my podcast or anyone else's, that you can find information about what our people have gone through, what other ethnicities have gone through. You can't go wrong with that, right? I mean, education is key, but also the preservation of that information, I think, is also important. No matter what ethnicity you are, take your phone, put it on record, and record your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, anyone talking about their history, their grandparents' history, the funny things that happen in life, the good things, the bad things, and be able to pass that down to your kids and your grandkids. That's how we keep their memories and stories alive, and we honor them. And I hope that you'll join me in that.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.